afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Brian. I'm from Forest Foundation Philippines. We are a non-government organization that provides grants to individuals and organizations with projects related to forest conservation. Welcome to the first session of our monthly webinar series. We're calling it Understory. We're taking the Understory as ecological principle or inspiration for this webinar series. And today we're going to talk about the importance of collaboration, of creativity and science communication in the context of forest protection and biodiversity conservation. All right, to discuss with you our program for this afternoon, we'll have a short introduction of what science communication is. We're also going to share with you our collaboration experience between scientists and artists and designers from Drink. We have 3 collaborators from different institutions, and then we'll also have a chance to ask questions later in chat, and then we're going to wrap things up by 5 p.m. All right, so to start off our program, may I call on Haris Guevara. Haris is the President and CEO of Drink Sustainability Communications Fair. Over to you.
Hi everyone. Thank you very much, Brian. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Haris Guevara from Drink Sustainability Communications. Before anything else, I'd like to personally thank you for joining us this afternoon. So maraming salamat. So just to give you a context of how this event started, how this project started. Almost 2 years ago, Brian Mariano of Forest Foundation Philippines and we were talking about how to strengthen or the need to strengthen science communication in the Philippines. I think at that time, we were looking for some guidebook or some parang communication or reference material on how best to communicate science to the general public. And it was very difficult for us to gather ample resources about the said topic at that time. And Drink, being a sustainability communications agency, of course, we have a lot of experience in communicating hard data and translating data and science into narratives that can easily be understood by the general public. So it's surprising also to find out that wala pala kaming template, that we haven't also studied our own creative process. So we understand that there is a need to look at our own thinking process as creatives, as designers, as writers, not just to make a template out of it, that we can use moving forward, but to also pinpoint the problems or the important things that we need to understand as communicators in communicating science, and sometimes with Drink, communicating hard science mismo. So that conversation with Brian started this partnership between Drink and the Forest Foundation Philippines to exploring the art of science communication. So, but we understand also that communication is always two-way, syempre, no? Normally, when a writer or when a designer writes or designs a material out of, for example, a research work or scientific work, he or she works alone, as an artist. The artist looks at the material and studies the material and understands it, no matter how difficult it is, and imagines a voice and creates a voice that he or she will use to create, to talk to a particular demographic, to a particular audience. So that scientist or the researcher is always out of the picture. Hindi namin siya nakakausap, and most of the time that happens. And hindi namin kinakausap yung researcher at scientist because we feel that we already understand the target audience. But syempre, it's always interesting to know, what do scientists think when they write, when they do their research work? Do they think about their audience during the process, while writing the work, while doing the research work? Do they have a chosen material na ba in mind to best communicate their work to a certain demographic? Or do they just leave it to the designer na parang bahala ng designer, because communication is, good communication, effective communication is the forte of the designer, the writer anyway. So the past 4 to 5 months, our writers and designers in Drink have collaborated with the scientists and researchers from the National Museum of the Philippines, Proceeds, and Dr. Denise Matias. They're all here. They work on different scientific projects with themes revolving around forest and biodiversity conservation, and created together the best possible communication materials for each project. So each step of the partnership was well documented by Drake, no, and by everyone. From the questions of the writer, the communicators, to the scientist, the perspective of the scientist, kung meron na ba silang material in mind in the process, to identifying the target audience, to choosing a platform, and to developing and creating prototypes for communication. So this afternoon, they're gonna share all their insights. They're gonna share all their experience during the partnership, and hopefully, this whatever we can learn from this session can have valuable contributions to the art of science communication in the Philippines, and syempre help move forward the conversation about the topic. So I'd like to thank Forest Foundation Philippines for partnering with Drink. And thank you to all our partners, our scientists and researchers, designers and writers who are panelists, who are part of this program, who will share their experiences today. And thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Harris. To share what science communication is all about, here's Hermilea Marie Castillo, or Mia for short. She's an assistant professor at the College of Development Communication in UP Los Baños. She has been with the university for 18 years and finished both her BS and MS Development Communication degrees at UPLB. Her research, extension, and public service involvements have focused on the field of science communication, particularly health and environment. Among her fields of expertise, aside from SciComm, include strategic communication planning and technical writing. Hi, Mamiya. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. So this afternoon, I'm going to share with you an overview of science communication from the perspective of the academe. So science communication is an academic discipline. In UP Los Baños, the College of Development Communication was one of the first institutions to offer science communication as an academic discipline. So I guess to contextualize the field of science communication, I have to briefly explain to you the roots of SciComm. DevCom started as agricultural communication. So it used to be under the College of Agriculture in UPLB. It's the Office of Extension and Publication. So the science communication we did back then was mainly communicating agricultural research results to farmers. And then when we became a department, a course on science reporting was offered. So it was mainly focused on writing science news articles or science feature articles. When we became an institute, we offered a SciComm graduate course, which was heavily information science focused. And then later on, in the early 90s, that's when we developed science communication courses for the undergraduate. At the time that the SciComm program was being developed for the for the Institute of Development Communication, the focus really, or the aim was to achieve science literacy, to communicate science for development, and to foster public understanding of science. So science communication is rooted in the principles of development communication. This is how we define science communication. So it's not merely focusing on the product of science, because most of the time, when we look at science stories, that's what we see, the technology or the innovations being developed. But we would also, aside from the know what, we also want to answer the know how and the know why. Of course, science communication has various publics, many different groups of stakeholders. And the main aim, because we are part of development communication as a field, is to achieve development, because we do believe that S&T is vital for the nation's development. So also being part of the DevCom field, we also want to focus on the participatory aspect of science communication. So it's not merely just disseminating information, but also getting people to participate in S&T discussions, especially on issues that will affect their lives. Okay, when we talk about SciComm, we usually look at popularizing science. So communicating science to non-experts or laymen. So that's the popular science communication. But at SciComm, we also look at the part of science communication where the growth of scientific knowledge is nurtured. So we also consider the scholarly and technical side of science communication. So when we talk about scholarly, that's the journal article or the conference proceeding, which is an avenue for scientists, for our experts to share their research with other experts. Understandably, because it's a very technical field, only few people understand the language of scholarly publications, but it's very important for S&T growth. We also look at the technical level of communication. So you're talking about technical manuals, technical guidelines, also policy briefs. So these are specialized audiences. The language is a little less complex, but still technical in nature. So this is how we look at science communication. Of course, popular science communication, because it caters to a larger part of the stakeholders or the population, that's what we usually see on TV, that's what we usually read in newspapers, and that's what we see online. To illustrate how we do SciComm in DevCom, I would like to share with you a project that we did years ago. It was a 4-year project. Because it's a 4-year project, the scope was quite big. It had 4 components. The project was about protecting livelihoods, human and ecosystem health. It aimed to reduce human health risks posed by toxic pollution in one of the dirtiest river systems in the Philippines. I'm not going to tell you anymore which river system it is. But we're looking at addressing many issues here. It's mainly an environmental problem, but it's closely intertwined with health issues as well in the community. So it had 4 components. You had fish farm and quality monitoring, river quality monitoring, pilot remediation, capacity building, policy and organizational development, and community education. The first 2 components, fish farm and river quality monitoring and pilot remediation, were the technical side of the project. The capacity building and community education were the COM side, or the SciComm side of the project. So we had various stakeholders. It was quite a challenge because of the scope of the project. Our main stakeholders were fisher folks because their livelihoods depended on that particular river system. We also included industries because they are one of the contributors to the pollution in the river system. The river system, of course, you had trash, you had human waste, and you had the byproducts of the industry's waste. And because they were waste from industries, they contained heavy metals. So heavy metal pollution pinaka-na-address dito. So we also included barangay health workers as our stakeholders. In any SciComm project that we are involved in, partners are very, very important. So for this project, because the river system traversed about, I think, 7 municipalities, if I remember correctly, but we were working with the 3 major municipalities that were affected by the pollution in the river system. So we had to work, of course, with the local government. We had to work with DENR, EMB, Environmental Management Bureau. We worked with the Fisher Folks Organization. We worked with industry association in terms of working together to reduce the pollution. Of course, it was impossible to completely eliminate the pollution. It was already there, but how can we further reduce it so we don't add on to the pollution in the river system? For the technical side, we worked with UPLB Biotech for the pilot remediation. We worked with UP Manila and the National Poison Management Control Center. And we worked with schools also for this project. For the SciComm component, it wasn't just producing communication materials for the stakeholders. Based on our stakeholder research, we found that all of them, the fisher folks, the households, all of them are well aware that the river system is polluted. What they really wanted to know was how they can participate in activities to reduce pollution in the river system, because many of them were living along the banks. And of course, the fisher folks, they get their livelihood from the river system. So they are well aware of that, but they wanted to know how they can participate in cleanup interventions or maybe rehabilitation interventions. So for the SciComm component, we focused on capacity building. The river monitoring was specifically for fisher folks. We taught them how to monitor the water quality. And then capacity building on pollution prevention, strengthening community organizations, strengthening the fisher folk organizations, and strengthening the water quality management area board. It's a multi-sectoral group composed of the LGUs along that particular river system. So they had to work together to come up with policies to further reduce pollution on that river system. And of course, stakeholder participation in rehab activities. What we did for the SciComm activities, so it ran for 4 years. Every year, we had 4 major activities. So we had the World Water Day in March, where these are just some of the activities that we did. We did mangrove rehabilitation, because mangroves are important ecosystems and they help curb pollution. We did an upcycling workshop, because a big part of the pollution, the factor that causes pollution are the trash from the household. So we did an upcycling workshop. We held a technical summit. The technical summit was participated in mostly by the LGUs and the industries and other policymakers. So we did World Water Day in March for 4 years, National Poison Prevention Week in June. For these events, we focused on poison prevention strategies, and this is where we partnered with UP Manila. We trained the barangay health workers on emergency management of people that are affected by heavy metal pollution. And then Nutrition Month every July. For that, we did school exhibits and community fora. For the school exhibits, it's usually how nutrition can help combat the effects of heavy metal pollution. And we had the Linggo ng Pangisdaan every October, or the Fisheries Week every October, where one of our activities was the mangrove nursery setup. This was requested by a fishery school. And we discovered that in one of the municipalities, they had an environmental organization composed of students from different schools in that municipality. And they wanted to help sustain the campaign for the river system, for pollution prevention for that river system. So we did a capacity building activity on how to develop messages, how to develop materials, so they can continue the campaign. So these are some of the pictures of our SciComm activities. For a school exhibit, we did a life-size snakes and ladders, and the information there is all about how micronutrients curb the effects of health effects of heavy metal poisoning. And we also had demos. This is our poster for our mangrove rehab and mangrove nursery setup. So it's a 4-year project, so there are a lot of materials. I just showed you some. So as a result of our extension and research activities in science communication, these are what I think the challenges and opportunities are for science communication in the Philippines. One is that SciComm is non-media centric. You can communicate science using multiple platforms. So you can reach more stakeholders, because one of the issues in science communication is reaching various stakeholders, especially those who are very far from the center. So because it's non-media centric, you can explore multiple platforms to communicate science. The second one is, I think, one of the most important opportunities for science communication, the collaboration between scientists and the experts and communication experts or designers or graphic artists. Because through these collaborations, we can increase the pool of science communicators in the Philippines. There are scientists who are also science communicators. And there are the most important thing, I think, for communicators, for people who work in communication, is to collaborate with experts, because first and foremost in SciComm, you have to understand the science. And that's quite a challenge. So a close collaboration between researchers, scientists, and communicators is important. If scientists want to communicate their own work, they can also work with communicators on how best to reach their stakeholders, and what platforms can the scientist use to communicate his or her work. And the last, I think, we have seen a lot of, many of the SciComm initiatives in the Philippines are more focused on information delivery. We have seen some cases of SciComm initiatives that are on the lay expertise and public engagement contexts. When we talk about lay expertise, these are, we consider lay experts as their knowledge is as valuable as the knowledge of scientists. We have a colleague here in the department who documented indigenous knowledge systems of ITAS that's related to climate change. And we also want to see more public engagement focused SciComm initiatives, meaning these initiatives are highly participatory and communities are empowered to work and to sustain this SciComm initiatives. So in a nutshell, that's what science communication is from the perspective of the academy. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Mia, for that brief introduction about science communication, yet very informative. And we're now going to situate the science in science communication through this collaboration project that we did with Drink Sustainability Communications and our researchers and scientists collaborators. JC from Drink is going to facilitate this discussion. Hi, JC.
Hi, thank you, Brian. As one of the creatives under Drink who worked on this project, and also having heard Miss Mia's explanation, I have a few realizations myself. So, together with Ellie Gagilonia, Drink's Director of Operations, we will be getting on the collaboration experience from the researcher and creative side. But before we get into discussing how the collab played out, let's learn more about both the researchers and Drink's creative team. Dr. Denise Matias is a research scientist at the Institute for Social-Ecological Research based in Germany. She studied biology at the Ateneo de Manila University and environmental sciences and policy at the Central European University in Budapest. She received her doctor in agricultural sciences degree at the University of Bonn for her research on the sustainability of an indigenous community forestry enterprise on honey gathering from wild giant honeybees in Palawan. She's also a grantee of the Forest Foundation and works on transdisciplinary research on biodiversity, ecosystem services, and traditions from native forest products. Next, we have the Proceeds Development Association, Inc., represented by Mr. Adrian Tobias. Adrian is a licensed forester, earning his master's degree in forest biological sciences, minor in botany, at the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. His exceptional portfolio includes various researches on biodiversity conservation, forest inventory, monitoring and assessment, and impact evaluation. Currently, he works as a research associate for Proceeds. And lastly, the National Museum of the Philippines, represented by Mr. John Michael M. Galindon. Mr. Galindon, known to his peers as JM, is currently working as a museum researcher at the Botany and National Herbarium Division of the National Museum. He is a field researcher with recent discoveries such as the smallest known Rafflesia species.
Thanks
So
for
I'll hand.
that, JC.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Ellie Gahilonia, and I'll be co-facilitating with JC this afternoon. On the creative side, we have the following who worked with the specific researchers that JC mentioned. We have with us Louis Cartagena, our senior art director. JC, my co-host, worked with Louis. She's our junior writer. They worked with Denise Matias. Ellie, worked with Mia Pangilinan, our junior writer. We worked with Adrian at Proceeds. And Denise Rameliosa, who's now our associate creative director, and Tony Antiporda, our editorial head, worked with the National Museum team.
So for our viewers who have any questions regarding the collaboration experience, science communication, and creative design, you can type them on the chat box.
To give our viewers an overview of the research, I would just like to ask, can our researchers describe what the research is about? Why did you choose this specific topic? I guess we want to know what's your rationale behind it. Any of the three researchers may unmute to expound on the research material.
Hello. Yeah, maybe I can start.
Hi, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm John Michael Galindon from the National Museum of the Philippines, known to my peers as JM or Mike, to others. Our project actually with Miss Denise and Yvonne of Drink PH is the uh, mobile museum boxes of the Visayas region. So since we are working with the National Museum of the Philippines, we thought of bringing a mini museum. They are enclosed in suitcase-like boxes that can be brought in public areas like universities. We targeted malls, but to no avail. But during the onset of the project, we went to Eastern Visayas, to Eastern Samar, to Northern Samar, to UP Tacloban, and the Visayas State University. So this just some of the so we have like 12 boxes. So we are just showing you some of the natural heritage, as you can say, like shells, like we have rafflesias of the Visayas, so we showed them in a box, no? And we also have like forest stratification. So ito yung ginawa namin with Drink PH, na we want to have a carousel-like, tama ba, Miss Denise? No? Carousel-like for social media platforms. So ito yung ano namin. So we want to reach hindi lang yung Visayas region but also other regions within the Philippines that maybe in the near future pwede din kami magkaroon ng mobile museum boxes of let's say Luzon, no? So we already have one for Mindanao, and currently we have the Visayas. So hopefully in the next years to come we have for 2 mobile museum boxes for the Luzon area.
Thank you, sir. So, ang exciting po ng National Museum boxes. How about let's hear from Mr. Adrian, my partner for the Biodiversity Assessment Project, sir. Sir Adrian, maybe you could
Yes,
share the
thank you
BAMs
so
with
much
everybody.
for yes, Ellie. So for our project, we made a deck for biodiversity assessment and monitoring system as a methodology. Because in proceeds, we have experienced a lot of biodiversity assessment activities throughout the country, from Batanes to Visayas and Mindanao. Now, in our experience, when we go to the site, we usually do workshops in order for the stakeholders be informed about this methodology, and so in the future they can use the methodology. Now the challenge is the methodology is very much complex. It is complicated and not really easily to be understood by people without technical knowledge on it. So for the deck, it is a simplified form of the methodology. Now, when we discuss this within the community or stakeholders, they can easily remember. So for the deck, as you can see dito sa presentation, very simplified siya, but at the same time, may laman. So in our experience working with the designers, we identified this as a tool because we can use it when we post it in social media platforms and of course in printing medias. So pwede namin iwan sa community and at the same time pwede namin itong i-post or i-share in any platforms online. The challenge with this work, since it is a complex process, it is a complex methodology, it is hard to cross the technical side and of course para mas maging mabilis or mas maging maganda yung delivery nito dun sa target audience namin. Now, our target audience include the stakeholders who are within the protected areas or yung mga stakeholders who usually conduct biodiversity assessment and monitoring system. Nandito yung mga papasok yung DNR, the academe and researchers. And then we also target the general public for them to understand why it is important to do this methodology. We want the general public to be informed with this process because we believe that through biodiversity assessment and conservation, we'll be able to catalog the diverse species that we have in the Philippines. And through that, we'll appreciate more the natural beauty or the richness of species in our country.
Thank you so much, sir. No. Last but not the least, how about let's hear from Denise?
Yes, thank you. So my project that was funded by the Forest Foundation Philippines was called Best Forests. It's biodiversity, ecosystem services, and traditions from indigenous forest products in Bukidnon and working with the Higaonon indigenous group. So this infographic actually tries to address 3 things. So first would be respect for indigenous peoples. Second would be respect for bees. And the third would be respect for customers of those who buy honey. So the first one is that I guess most of us are aware that indigenous peoples in the Philippines are discriminated. So they are looked down upon. And again, there are also some prejudice. Often they would say like, oh, it's not hygienic how they do their honey collection, etc. So at least here we try to have some of the myths debunked, and then for the bees we have some of the fear against them, but of course, on the other hand, from a scientific perspective, we also need to conserve them because of their different contribution to the ecosystem. So pollination, etc. And of course, in this case, they are giving provisioning ecosystem services such as honey. So this also introduces the different types of bees. So what are the native honeybees of the Philippines, and then which is Apis dorsata or Apis cerana, but the ones that you find in boxes, those are not native. Those are introduced species. And so we try to just encourage people to get to know bees and then help them thrive in the country. And lastly, for the customers, so maybe some of you who are honey consumers, you may have heard in the news that there are fake honey in the market. And so we also have here a link to the legitimate sellers. And so all in all, these are the things that we try to address in this infographic. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. So those are our three very interesting research materials, no? So now let's, I guess we can jump off to the other side of the discussion. Your research works along with our first alignment together. It's a really good jump off point in creating the communication materials. And just to give context, parang it's been, I think how many months na rin? Like 3 months, I guess, that the
Yeah.
creative team has built this project, this collaboration.
Mhm. And syempre, as part of the creatives team, as one of the writers, what I really appreciate about the collaboration, since I work with Miss Denise Matias and Louis, is how we were able to do a back and forth through the internet. And this helped gather the details that we find important and be able to communicate that through the design. So for our designers and writers like sila Louie and Tony, what was your initial vision for the creative output, and how did the collab experience shape the final output that we have right now?
Hello. I guess I'll start since Sir JM also started with the National Museum earlier. So, again, I'm Tony. I was the main copywriter for the National Museum boxes. So, nag-evolve siya from the first meeting to the final output, and I guess that's what's great because we were able to really listen to the objectives and the goals of the researchers from the National Museum to really see what their intent was with coming up with the communication material. So initially we just wanted to have one social media post, one photo carousel for all of the 12 National Museum boxes. Pero we realized that that kind of defeats the whole point of having the boxes in the first place because the idea is the boxes really try to showcase the biodiversity and the local heritage of the Visayas, and really cramming them into just one social media post would really not be able to unpack the wealth of information that's available in those boxes. So eventually we were able to realize now we must be able to really translate or really bring the National Museum box experience to social media, especially in the context of the pandemic na they weren't really able to tour the boxes, the museum boxes all throughout the Visayas as originally planned. So the idea is even in with the restrictions of the pandemic, the youth, especially students, and more importantly, probably the general public must be able to see and appreciate these 12 very particular museum boxes. So that's for the National Museum boxes, JC.
Ikaw, Louie, kamusta?
Okay, so to discuss a bit about the initial vision for the honeybees infographic, we were very ambitious at the start as a team for the creatives because we really find that the information really wanted to again help the indigenous communities, conserve the bee population, as well as inform customers about the honey products that they buy locally. But we realized through our discussions with Dr. Denise Matias that we need to start first with raising awareness and building, communicating more information about the different species of the bees here in the Philippines so that we could debunk the myths and other negative perceptions that they may have. And initially, we wanted to create a microsite or a website to house all the information that could be shared to the public about the bees, the honey products, and the indigenous communities. But uh, in our discussion, it was brought up that there was already an existing partnership for this output. So what we wanted to do is to help augment the communication materials and add to that by creating uh, social media content. So something that could be shared in either Facebook or Instagram and other channels. And with that, there is a certain limitation on the extent of the information that we could use and present so that it is digestible and shareable for the audience. But what we really liked about the collaboration experience is that there was an opportunity to build from that first output and potentially expand to more communication materials in the future. And to add to that, experience, contextualizing the experience, we were very thankful that research materials were provided since we had access to communicating with a researcher, and they were written in a way that was not difficult to understand and distill into infographics. And there was a clear direction from the researcher, and we were able to take action effectively so that the flow from finding a key message and choosing a target audience and to creating the output was smooth. And lastly, we really appreciated that through the collaboration, we were able to see how different perspectives of the partners had their unique value and were very helpful for us designers and writers and other creatives to turn our visions into reality. So that was our experience in this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Thank you, Tony. It's really interesting to see how the collaboration influenced the direction of both copy and design. But apart from these, how did you find the overall collaboration experience? Can I hear from Ellie and Dr. Denise Matias about this?
Yeah, siguro I'll go first. As a designer, the overall collaboration experience was very important. Like when we were initially thinking about the idea, parang what if the designer only gets the copy or the content, and then we can talk to the researcher. It was so hard because we wanted to do so many things. Like what Louis said, when you give a designer material, we can think of so many things: an app, a website, everything else. But once you get to actually talk to the person, you understand and you get to ask the right questions. Like, who is this material for? What are the communication problems surrounding it? And then in that way, the design and the communication solution narrows down. So we know na we're designing something that's not just, I hopefully it would look good. That's the basic premise. Everything has to look good and it has to have high quality. But we want to make sure that it works. For it to work, we need to be able to ask the right questions. So that was how the collaboration was for me. So for me and Sir Adrian.
Thank you. How about for Dr. Denise Matias? How was the collaboration experience?
Yes, so for me, I was really amazed at the beginning because they were able to distill the messages from the scientific papers. So the summary that was sent to me or the discussion that was very fruitful, and it was quite easy because I didn't really have to explain that much anymore. So that was good. And then I really liked as well that there were some email communications. And so I think communication itself between the designer and the scientist is very important. And so if anything, I would just recommend that just to increase this communication and coordination. And that was something that I found very helpful and something that I would recommend that everyone do in the future.
Thanks for that. After knowing about how the collaboration helped us, how the experience was very helpful for everyone, how about looking at I guess now challenges and opportunities by working together? No, here maybe I can ask my partner, Sir Adrian and Louis to answer this question. Challenges and opportunities that we had.
Hi, Ellie. Siguro for the challenges that we had, it was our experience when we are trying to identify what kind of material we are going to produce. In our first meeting, we discussed all possible topics, and then we also discussed possible audience before we come up with this material. And after several days of brainstorming, we come up with this biodiversity assessment and monitoring system to be presented as deck. So when we had a meeting, at first I had to tell you a story of what we are actually doing in the field. So uh, I, I started with going to the site, and then what we do to establish quadrats, do the track, document the species before we. I guess that's a challenge. Uh, Yun nga, sabi ko before, uh, it is better for the research, for the designer also to be on the field with the researcher. But in this time, it is not possible kasi nga there is a pandemic. So what we did, we had a lot of brainstorming, we had a lot of discussions for this material to be produced.
Thank you, Sir Adrian.
Okay, so to add to what Sir Adrian mentioned, so yes, we agree na from our discussions in the previous months that the pandemic really affected the collaboration because there was no up close or physical access to the fieldwork material, and that was very important. On top of that, there were also limited communication via the online platform. So even though we were communicating via email or via video calls, we wanted to do more of that so that we could improve on our outputs, as well as the limited access to visual resources. So some of us, we can take pictures on site, so we relied on stock photos or icons and illustrations to help us in our outputs. Um, Second challenge that we faced was to be aware of our biases as partners. So some of us come from a creative field, some of us from a science field, and some from an organization field. So we wanted to be aware of that, and there was a need to find the middle ground between, scientific accuracy and room for creative treatment. And lastly, as a challenge was to what which was raised specifically for our collaboration on the honeybees was to avoid anthropomorphizing the bees in popularizing the scientific information, but still maintain or evoke an approachable vibe. In terms of opportunities, we were glad that to understand through the collaboration that everyone, scientists and designers and writers, have the capacity to be creative and to think in a scientific method. So we wanted more integration of design into the scientific process so that the collaboration continues for other projects. And we also hope that through this, we could be setting an example for future spaces for communication so that we could have greater impact to communities. And by building a network, we could create or we could increase our interest in science communication to harness the power of digital during this time. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Louie. I really hope that this platform really does amplify the need and the opportunity for designers and researchers to talk about how to communicate their materials. Now let's hear from, I guess, Denise and JM. What was your biggest takeaway from the collaboration, especially with regards to science communication?
My biggest takeaway with regards to science communication, not just from the collaboration with National Museum, but also from the collaborations all the collaborations in this project is that research should reach everyone because everyone can benefit from research. At the start of the project, we were thinking of our target audiences and what's the best way to communicate with them. And I realized na in an ideal world, research would target all types of audience through various ways and different forms that are appropriate for them. There's no one size fits all approach or solution when communicating research or science. Also, more than giving access to and simplifying information, science communication should identify information that is pertinent to each target audience and convey the information in a way that will guide and help people make better and informed decisions that will improve their communities' lives. Ayan.
Mag-add lang ako dun sa sinabi ni Miss Denise, no? Kasi for us, since we are in the National Museum, we want to have a larger audience, no? And we saw museum boxes, but to our other projects and to our other artifacts na nandito sa National Museum, we can make the same concept, no? Science communication projects na pwede naming i-post through our social media platforms sa Facebook page of the National Museum of the Philippines na pwedeng not just for mobile museum boxes but with our other collections pwedeng makita na ma-appreciate ng general public. Hindi lang yung may access sa National Museum and our other regional museums but to everyone na may access sa social media, makikita yung gagawing science communication that would be best for the future of National Museum of the Philippines.
Thank you for your answers. So we can now answer some questions na galing sa chat box. Due to time constrictions, we will be choosing either 2 to 3 questions. So your first question is, how would you encourage scientists to work with artists and artists with scientists and researchers? Pwede po ba marinig yung input nyo, Miss Mia Castillo and Sir JM?
Hi, JM. Sorry, we cannot hear you. Maybe we could ask Denise instead while waiting for JM siguro.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so I think it's so first and foremost, science communication is really important. And of course, for most of the scientists, we are funded by public money. So this is one way by which we can give back to the people. And so it's very important that we find ways to communicate our science. So there are different ways to do it. Having visual materials is just one. But I could say that to encourage scientists to collaborate, there are very good artists out there. However, not all could do the illustration well. So first, we have to encourage them or let them know, communicate with them which message we want to give to the public. And then secondly, encourage them that, hey, your work can be beyond aesthetics. It could also be part of a bigger picture, helping society in general. And so please collaborate as well with scientists. Yeah, thank you.
For the artist side, pwedeng marinig yung opinion mo, Denise Ramalhosa.
The other Denise, yes.
Yes.
Right now, wala akong maisip na campaign or solution in mind. But if there's something creatives probably should know, is that collaborating with researchers and scientists adds great value to the work. They can give you insights that make your work more meaningful and creative. And more than correcting the data mistakes in your work, they help you make it make sense for other people. Thank you.
Hi, Joanne. Can I also add something?
Yes, sir. Definitely po.
Okay. So
Yes.
I would just like to relay that scientists or researchers can produce technically substantial data or reports. On the other hand, not all scientists are creative. Now, the designers are very much are more likely to be able to produce a visually appealing materials which the scientists cannot produce easily. That's the power of collaboration, because when we collaborate, we will be able to advance our efforts. We in Proceeds, we always believe that our outputs, our researchers should be relayed into a mainstream media, so the public will be able to appreciate more of what we are doing. And I think the best people who can do that are the designers or those who are working on the creative side.
Thank you, Sir Adrian. JC, do we have any other questions from the chat box that we can answer?
Yes, there are two more questions. Yung first one is, what are your tips in popularizing hard science data? I currently work in a biotech manufacturing company, and when it comes to lead generation, things get a bit stuck. Thanks.
Siguro I can answer on the side of design and communication. Like if ever you are having challenges in terms of lead generation, I guess what you can do is to, like in general, always try to distill an idea. Ask yourself, what does the user understand? Asan yung level of knowledge niya? Maybe that's why they're not engaging. So when you answer that question, you will be able to simplify your concepts in a much more, I guess, bite-sized manner.
This is Tony. JCL try to provide an answer from, I guess, a science journalism perspective. Kasi since I'm approaching it from an editorial perspective as well, since the question is about popularizing hard science data, I'm not looking at it in terms of lead generation, but really in terms of telling a story. Because there's many ways that you can tell a story. So in a way, there's many ways that you can present this hard science data. And I guess one of the key ways in which we can popularize it is choosing the right angle or the right way of reframing the story. What is it that you're trying to say? The biggest heart, I guess, or core of the story is what's in it for the audience that you're trying to reach. What's in it for them? Like if you're trying to sell a technology, for example, because I see here that the one who asked is really from a biotech manufacturing company. It's not just you're trying to sell a product, but how does it benefit a consumer, and what are its advantages, for example, and how does it stand to really make their lives better. So that's one angle of approaching it. The other one would be presenting it in terms of like presence and absence, meaning comparing yourself in terms of like what are the stories out there in terms of a similar product or a similar technology, and try to fill in that gap. Because what are the stories not being told about this particular technology or innovation, and you try to reframe or re-angle your particular product towards that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony, for that answer for the question. So your last question for today is, do you have or know someone who has experience in communicating science through performing arts? And do you think this can be effective as well?
Yeah, hi JC. Maybe regarding that question, Forest Foundation has supported theater play related to forest conservation, communicating the importance of Sierra Madre. Actually, there's going to be a digital launch for that play with Tabsing Collective and Forest Foundation Philippines. It's titled Higanting Haligi sa Hilaga. So stay tuned for that show. So yeah, basically we can also use performing arts theater to convey the information that we'd like to share with people. So yeah, I guess we have lots of questions here in our Q&A chat, But in the interest of time, I guess we'll just get back to those who sent us yung questions. And then we can continue yung conversation beyond dito sa webinar na to. I think that's the value of online engagement as well. We can always continue yung conversation after. So we'll send an email po doon sa mga nag-ask ng questions. And then we can continue po yung conversation after. All right, so thank you again, JC and Ellie, for facilitating the collaboration experience, distilling our lessons and experiences. Totoo na yung co-creation space, yung collaboration space ay very important for us to learn from each other, for us to make or to achieve yung behavior change na gusto nating ma-achieve. So we've situated yung science doon sa science communication sa context ng forest and biodiversity protection. And we've seen case studies. We've heard the experience of our researchers. We've heard the experience of our partners doing the creative work. And we've seen how these two could always intermingle with one another. But hindi rin siya devoid of challenges tulad ng na-mention kanina. So, yeah, thank you so much sa attend po ng webinar natin for today. Thank you once again, Denise, Adrian, and JM for accepting yung invitation namin as collaborators for this one. And of course, yung team ng Drake, yung technical writers ninyo, and